Welcome to the Saint Macrina Centre occasional gatherings. And today we're pleased that Andrew Bingham is going to lead us in a consideration of synergy. This is in our series on words that sort of echo through the Orthodox tradition. And we're having an opportunity to think about them and consider what they illuminate for us. So good to see you, Andrew.
Thank you, David, and thank you to all of you for being here. It's not only a joy to gather in conversation at the end of each month, but it's a joy to have, let's say, continuity in the conversation too. And so it's appreciated very much. Synergy, yeah, we're talking about synergy today. And it's a word which has become kind of cliched in the world. It's kind of worn out a little bit. We try to invest it with some refreshed energy. Last time we were talking about obedience. Obedience. We said obedience is just a kind of listening in the direction of, a kind of listing unto, kind of paying attention in this sort of direction. Obedience precedes synergy. We have to be able to listen to the other person, or to listen to creation first. And obedience really begins all Christian activity and relation. And obedience is also a question of how we approach, how we apprehend, how we draw near another person, or an aspect or element of creation. And so immediately we can say synergy is about togetherness, and therefore about relation. The first thing we need to ask is, how do we describe the horizon of our own? How do we describe the horizon of one's own? I think we often link meaningful movement with purposeful movement. And then I think we often link purposeful movement with willed movement. But as we mentioned last time, and remind ourselves again today, the horizon of willed movement is lesser than that of natural movement. And the horizon of natural movement is lesser than that of grace-filled movement. So how do we respond to the world, to each other? And this is important because our response provides the horizon and meaning for that in which we partake. Our response provides the horizon and meaning for that in which we partake. The gift of grace offers greater freedom than the gift of nature. And the gift of nature, our nature, in turn, is greater than the gift of our will. And so our response to another person cannot be fulfilled merely on the level of will. It needs to include nature and grace too. But nature and grace are revealed in Christianity as gifts beyond the horizon of our will. They're neither willed nor subject to our will, in a sense. If we identify ourselves with our will, then we likely perceive the extent, the horizon of our will, or the extent of our purposeful movement, our deliberate movements. I think we see, or we sense the limit of our will as the beginning of our negation, where I no longer will things, where I no longer control, then I'm somehow negated. Someone else's will takes over, not me. But there's no need to think of the limit of our will or the horizon of our will as a beginning of negation. That's first of all to identify our will with our being. And it delimits the arena of struggle to one element of our person. If you look at it this way, then where our will ends, nature, grace-filled nature, greets us gladly. We're given our form, but the horizon of our form doesn't begin our negation. The horizon of our form begins our transformation. So having that in mind, synergy, the sin at the beginning of that word, we begin together. Christianity teaches that ontology commences with communion. Being begins in communion. And the word synergy, it evokes ideas of or images of shared currents of energy, of movements, everything moving and moving in concert. We get this kind of image of synergy from, well, it's throughout the tradition, but there are a few clear scriptural images of it. In Genesis, we read the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, intimately conjoining with creation. One of our prayers acclaims the Holy Spirit as being everywhere present and filling all things. Synergy. So that sin, that together, where energy comes together, is mutually shaping. And in a way, synergy means conformation, formation together, sharing the energy, conformation. But this means that the form of our being is kind of healed in conformation together with others. And in that conformation becomes transformation. The gift of our being includes and is fulfilled in company with others. We could think of this using the musical kind of example of melody and harmony. And when we're in harmony, we're more beautiful together than alone. And our being, our life, our experience is of participation. It is participative. The tradition teaches us clearly. We know only in participation, even if we're deluded into thinking that we're alone, that we're not participating in anything. We know only in participation. And this idea of participation is a deep mystery of the church. Back to the word synergy, synergy. In one of his works, Gregory Palamas says that two kind of things can be said about the Christian deity. One, it is revealed as a triad of hypostases, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which clarifies our sense of relation and communion and our being. And Palamas also says we can use the terms essence and energy or energies with God. Now, the essence is of the mystery of the Godhead and ungraspable and unclarified and never revealed to us. But the energies is of the revelation, not the mystery, the revelation of the Godhead. At the heart of tradition, we have the energies of God as gift of life and being. Tradition is a form of attending to these energies of God. But energy moves, is in movement, flows, has a rhythm. And so when we talk about the Christian tradition, or just existence, we're not only talking about sense, but also about cadence or movement as well. Thinking is a very important part of our drawing near, our gathering, but it's not the only thing. And so when we say, when we refer to synergy, it's not like that's a method that can be distinct from content. In tradition, there's no real divorce between method and content. And we have a lot of tradition anyways. No real divorce. Synergy is our form of life and it's the truth of our being. Now, we say we partake, we participate in the energies of God, in the flow of meaning, which is always renewed. This participation or this partaking has kind of two aspects. One is phrasing. We phrase the tradition as we're doing now, try to make sense of it. But the other is we are phrased by the tradition. So synergy means both our own work, phrasing, and our own work upon us, being phrased by. We participate as creatures made in the image and likeness of God, loving and beloved, and realized in a communion of love. That's us, the participants. What we partake of is both difficult and simpler to phrase. We're partaking of the gift of our being and life, the horizon of which, or the center of which, is always both drawing near to us and, as it were, receding. It's both the most intimate of nearnesses and the deepest of mysteries. And ultimately, we partake of God. This is a curious teaching in Christianity, that our existence is a form of participation in the creative love of God. If our being is participation, then all relation is known in and as a form of participation. We can't help but be interested, involved in the being of others. The fullness of participation is a great mystery, phrased with reverence at the center of our meaning. And this is because we partake of a living truth, which is of a greater measure than our minds can grasp, that our minds can comprehend. Participation is not a form of agreement, nor is it a form of comprehension. And it would be silly to think that we had to agree or comprehend all in order to participate. And so synergy really is a gift. It's a gift. It says all of creation is intimately drawn near, being drawn near. For God is with us. God is with us. And that phrase is a deep mystery. Synergy is at the heart of Christian truth and personhood. And the mode of our personhood is, the saints tell us, concentration. It's both the mode of our personhood and the work of our personhood. Concentration, drawing in to the center of the gift. And we're taught that at the center of our own, the center of the gift of our being, we find Christ's own. We find the kingdom of heaven to be within. At our most intimate, our being is of Christ. In saying that, I mean, in a way that's plain and in a way that's beyond. Synergy is both a great revelation, immediately we see things more clearly, and a great mystery, where immediately everything we see becomes of a different kind of perspective and horizon. Maximus the Confessor likes to say that the incarnation of the divine logos is both endlessly present and endlessly ungraspable, always with us fully, and yet we don't even ever begin to approach it with comprehension. This seems to me an image of synergy. Maximus also likes to say that our life is a carrying and being carried. A carrying and being carried. This is also an image of synergy, in that our efforts, our delights, our struggle is never simply ours alone. Even if we think we're alone as a person, the divine indwells in each. And so this is a way of saying, and this is my final thought here. This is a way of saying that the form of creation is ongoing transformation, which is the sense of synergy. Synergy means ongoing mutual transformation in loving relation. And it's what we're trying to phrase when we read or hear in the tradition. Phrases like partakers of the divine, or terms like theosis. Just as obedience begins our understanding of synergy, I think synergy begins by understanding of participation or partaking in that sense. I have no leading questions. Those are my thoughts. But let's open it up to conversation now, if anything makes sense here. Every
Christian,
aspect, every aspect of our life is synergetic.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Christian, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted just to ask about the relationship between prayer and synergy, if you have any thoughts on that.
Probably, they probably can be phrased very closely together. If we move prayer past asking for or demanding or just saying something loudly, and think of it as that's, the most intimate of communions. And often it takes the form of a deep concentration, even when it's liturgical. It's still an entering into the center of ourselves and bowing in adoration. They seem to be of a piece. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. I wondered if you've mentioned I think Maximus was talking about life being both carrying and being carried. And so I wonder if prayer is similarly both the drawing inward and the drawing inward into that sort of place of intrinsic communion, but also the addressing of other. And it's really both of those things. And yeah, so there's room for both of those things, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the way you might have been paraphrasing Palamas or some others, but the way you just phrased it that right there is exactly how they speak about movements.
Mm.
Reaching back to Dionysius the Areopagite, he might have been the first to put it this way, but it's in Palamas for sure. He says there's a circular movement, a drawing within, and there's also the movement forward, right?
Mm.
And they're both important. We don't just move forward because at the center of our meaning, Christ at the center of our being, so we go from center to center, right? But it's also not, let's say, self-absorption.
Mm.
We go in and we meet Christ at our center. But when we go out, we meet Christ at the center of the other person too. So it's all a kind of concentration, right? The center of everything is grace and the face of Christ.
Mm.
I like that. That's very good.
Mm.
Maybe, Andrew, I could ask you to say a bit more about one of the distinctions you made just a short while ago when you said participation is not, if I understood you correctly, is not seeking agreement, and it is not necessarily seeking comprehension. It's something other than that. Can you unwrap that a little bit more?
Yeah, a little bit. So that did kind of stand out slightly oddly. I was going to make a couple of remarks about cataphatic thought and apophatic thought, and how even when we're saying yes or no to something cataphatically, we are already, by existing, partaking in something. And so our participation doesn't begin with a yes or a no in that way. I think it also echoes out of that thought that the limit of our will is not the beginning of our negation, but rather the beginning of communion and loving transformation.
Mm.
And then, in a sense, the gift of our being can be comprehended. In another sense, it can never be remotely comprehended. And I think that, well, I was also going to talk about identification and identifying with a certain set of ideas and making that kind of devaluing participation to mental assent or agreement. But if it's a mystery, and all of good life is a mystery, love is a mystery, marriage, children, friendship, joy, it would be kind of strange for us to seek exhaustion as the beginning of participation. To know everything or to agree with everything.
So is the key here that, at least the way I phrased it, that it's participation is not seeking agreement. It's not seeking comprehension, that the act of seeking is a different disposition from what you are speaking about.
Probably, because, I mean, we have to be careful about images and stuff. But we often think of seeking as for something which is absent. And if we follow the tradition, then our being begins in synergy. We're not looking for something, it's right there. But if we think of, you know, to seek its depth or the profound, you know, beauty of its gift. Yeah. But it's not a form of discovering something that isn't there. Yes.
So almost more an unveiling of what is already there.
Much more like that. Yeah, or recognition. I mean, recognition, affirmation, living out. You know. Hmm.
This is kind of bringing up maybe the idea of process over the final product, when it's the participation itself, not necessarily we're trying to get some sort of end goal out of it. Like as you're talking about synergy, I was reminded some conversations recently with friends of mine about AI and art and creativity. And should we use AI at all, or can we use it a little bit? And how, whether you're writing or painting or making music, you know, there's something about the creative process where if you have too much will or too rigid about the outcome, it's not going to go well. It's like sometimes you write something and you don't know where it's going, but through the process, it shapes you as you're shaping it. And not just with creativity, but like in our work, if we have a people-oriented profession or even working with tools or our hands, we have to have enough openness to the machine or the rock or the wood or the person to be open enough to what is and letting the other shape us while we're shaping it. And we're transformed just in the process of participating, even if we don't know what the product or the outcome is going to be. It's just we need to do this. We need to participate. That's why art is so healing, I think. So the participation, not necessarily seeking agreement or comprehension, it's like we have to participate. That's part of being. And I think good will come out of it, but we need to just be in the process.
Jeremy, you said something really intriguing there in terms of what we think about the outcome of something that we're participating in. If we get so caught up in the outcome, we're missing being. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately, just kind of the sense of detachment, and it gets kind of weird in thought, but detached from my desire of a particular outcome of any relationship, any art piece, anything at all, and what do we need in order to not grasp for an outcome? What's needed in this this synergy, this participation, or what happens maybe is kind of what I'm trying to think of. Because it seems like there has to be something our mind focuses on. If we're investing in something, we're seeking a particular outcome of that. So I want what I'm invested in. How do we let go of that? Is that part of what this participation is, or concentration is intriguing? If the conversation goes that way, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about concentration, Andrew. Is that something of attention that, of course, Simone Weil is very much, she reveals that, and she talks a lot about waiting for something coming. You don't seek after it, you wait for it, hence why she wrote Waiting for God. But what more can we look at in terms of what concentration is in this synergy, this participation experience? I'm looking for words. I love this. This is wonderful. But to not grasp for a desired outcome, I think is really important. And I want to discover why. So that's my question, thought, response. Thanks.
This is very good, and we're in the thick of it now. Jeremy, I mean, the way you phrased it was nicely done. It's also what I was trying to reference, that there's not really a method and then contents in Christianity, right? But if it always is just our existing as participating in love. Prayer in Greek, the word for prayer and the word for attending to, or attending, attention, are very close. That could have been the source of that image. I just think, like,
just a few moments, Kahindi. Just 1 second. Yeah, go on, Andrew.
I think if we're participating in a game of soccer, do we agree with it? It doesn't make any sense, right? And if we think, all right, so there's the method and then the goal, we always have to have the goal. But if our life is one of response, we can't foresee, right? We can't be predisposed, as David Goa said a couple of months ago. We have disposition, not predisposition. And so the way that we respond to our beloved tomorrow will just happen. And how we respond will provide the meaning of that process, that event, that relationship. Pardon me, please.
Kahindi?
Yeah, the discussion sounds very abstract, to me when Andrew was doing the exposition, but as the conversation, opens up, I think I'm having a grasp, of the contents. And I find it very interesting. My mind just went back to, the economy of society, the way we live, that there has to be productivity. Everything must have a particular end, in view. And here we are saying that, just sharing the presence, just being engaged, letting the deep call onto deep, is its own reason, and it's not within my power what comes out of it, but being there, open, to that relationship, that togetherness in that moment, and letting, life, generate itself, and lead the relationship, wherever. And my thought came to, Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus, and Martha and Mary, okay, and Martha sitting and, Mary was busy, we have to, do this, something, I said, well, she has chosen the better part, And the better part, just sitting down there listening, sharing the moment, and for me, it takes, learning, to cultivate this, experiencing the moment rather than seeking that it has to come out in a particular way. But being in the presence, of another, and letting deep cause unto deep. It's like maybe two lovers, they're just satisfied, with the presence of one another. And in the process, life, is flowing. There's a kind of animation, within that gives them that sense of humanity and belonging. Thank you for this discussion. I really appreciate it.
Just to stay with this idea of result, and I like that place you open up for us, Candy, that place of the lovers. And we all know that biblical language is rich in this kind of phrasing of a close love, closely drawn love. Moving or trying to work our way around this idea of looking for result or something concrete. We mentioned two things that have been on my mind lately. One David Goa said, and one a brother of mine said. David likes to remind us that in the liturgy, when we approach communion, it's not an act for ourselves alone. I think he might have even said for ourselves, without the alone. It's not for ourselves. It's together with others, for each of our friends and company. A brother of mine was remarking lately in response to someone who decried the fact that they could not be at the liturgy because they had to attend to necessary work, right? Much like Mary and Martha. The person who is in obedience or in love, doing work that is necessary and not at the liturgy, as my brother put it, makes up for it later in his cell. It's a strange kind of, I don't think that making sense. It's a strange kind of temptation to not only want to exist in truth, but also to be seen existing in truth. To be recognized as being existing in truth. To have someone say, ah, yes, there is a result. Rather than just living the truth quietly. There's a kind of a doing and then a proclaiming of what you've done. The opposite of concentration. Do you make of this, David? This idea of result and partaking. What's in your mind?
Well, I love the fact that Kahindi has raised that gospel narrative because I was at actually Act Ted Hill's school here a month or so ago when a Franciscan was talking with the students about that narrative, was asking them to contemplate that narrative, to proclaim it, which I found interesting phrase, to proclaim it, and then to sit aside and in twos or threes to proclaim it to each other. And I really thought he was encouraging them to walk around in that narrative, to see that narrative as perhaps even illuminating your life. And he also used 19th, early 20th century painting, which showed Martha and Mary and Jesus Christ in their home. And when you read the narrative, Martha's the one that asks him to come. In the particular painting, you see Lazarus standing to the side and wondering it looks to me like he's wondering what's going on. And you see Martha beginning to attend to things she needs to attend to, and Mary sitting close. So one of the things that the Franciscan asked was for people to consider just a little bit where they were in this narrative. And you think of where are you in these moments where there is an opportunity to attend. What are you up to? Are you like Lazarus, at least in the painting, wondering what's going on? I thought at the time a little bit about my time in the Near East. And of course, this biblical narrative is set in that world, and that world still exists. Women don't invite people to the houses. It just isn't on. In a large part of that culture has been inherited by Arab Muslim tradition. And I remember how striking it was to be in Sheikh's home in Damascus, where the house itself was gender specific, where all the serving took place by the men. The men serve you because women can't serve you, but men can serve women. It highlights a world quite different than our own, I suppose. But when you think of that, what that narrative is saying about synergy, I suppose the most obvious part of it is to think that to see Mary as attending to the Word. But Martha, of course, is also attending to the Word. Not the same way. And maybe even Lazarus is in that painting, but not the same way. words of Jesus Christ are really important. I certainly saw in myself that day as he was talking us through this and we were thinking about it, that I have had a long habit of being Martha in those situations. I'm not inclined, as at least it was depicted in the painting, to be Lazarus, to look suspiciously. Although now that I say it, I realize that that's not entirely true. That is there on a number of occasions. But to just putter around and see that everybody's comfortable, that they're able to engage each other and what have you. So I since the gospel texts are not really about either or about something that's perfect and something that isn't, and this question of synergy, of our work together, it takes many forms. But maybe the part of what's important here is to not assume that whatever form it has taken for you in a given moment is the appropriate and proper form. To not see it that way, but to understand that there's various rhythms at play here. I mean, you used some musical analogies, Andrew, and I think they're really helpful with this sort of thing. And then when I think of the liturgy, I think, I mean, my sense is that when we're in the liturgy, when we're praying the liturgy, and whether a person is there or not, whether they wish to be there or not, whether they're properly concentrating or not, whether they're able to go forward and receive communion or not. My sense is that it's not the right question to have. The liturgy begins and it circles around us again and again. It gathers up. It gathers together. So we sometimes, I think, and there's a history behind this, but I think it should be said, we sometimes fetishize the liturgy. We think that it becomes a kind of object instead of participating in its synergy, which is for the life of the world. It's for the life of the world. What we're doing isn't, and somebody like Father Alexander Schmemann talks about it, and of course, it's there so vividly in Maximus. It's the ultimate purpose of the cosmos. So it's distilled in the liturgy, if you will. There's a concentration there. But it's thine of thine own. And because it's thine of thine own, we offer to thee, not for ourself, not for our soul, not even for our gathered congregation. We offer it there for the life of the world. And we hope, pray, at best incline ourselves to the transformation that you spoke about, so that when we walk out, communion is everywhere present. And we see the world with new eyes. So whatever you're doing, coming back to this notion of prayer that you began with, given the question and the theme that Christian raised, every thought, every act, every encounter that we have in our life where we are truly present is prayer, is communion, is it. And it all changes us, as some of you talked about, when the craftsman with the wood or the metal, or the gardener, it's modest. It's really modest. And I sometimes think we forget how modest it is. And it's daily. And it's ordinary. And it's a wonder and a delight. But if there's a passion in us that seeks something, or a passion in us that wants to comprehend or make something out of something, then all that disappears. So
It's really beautifully said, David. Can I push this a little bit further? Do you see there being a distinction between synergy and communion? Or do you see it as being different ways of phrasing the gift of our life together? I didn't think of that until just now, but
yeah,
what do you make of it?
well, I mean, it seems to me that where there's synergy, there's communion, and where there's communion, there's synergy. It is two different ways of phrasing something. And the reason they're both there is that we can often assume the communion is something. And we can also maybe assume that synergy, that is being together or work together, is something. And it's a way of, the tradition has, of trying to help us understand that both of these words are speaking about the Word made flesh, about the potential of our way of being and becoming in our daily life in the world. But what do you think? You see something different in them?
No, I think that's nicely phrased. And I like that's as you put it, they temper each other. That urge to fetishize or to be idolatrous with an aspect of the gift is really dangerous. And a word like communion, which is a kind of a way of phrasing an ongoing relationship. You're right. If we, it's not a thing. And to refer back to perhaps what part of what you were saying earlier, we can't seek it in that way. We have to, as it were, find ourselves there. But
only say the word and I shall be healed.
mm-hmm.
It says in the liturgy. It's not ours to do.
Mm-hmm.
We have so many lovely ways in the church of taking note of this. When people, for example, bring names forward, as is a tradition, at least in some places, where they want prayer for the living and prayer for those who've departed this life. And when those names are taken and set on the table of oblation, and the priest begins to prepare the bread. Well, even before that, I saw it so beautifully at the patriarchal parish in Bucharest years ago, where it's on a bit of a hill, and the patriarch was there, and there were many people there. I mean, thousands of people there. So you couldn't get into the church. But I saw all kinds of people coming up to a door just outside the um, the sanctuary, where a deacon would come out, and they would be bringing these loaves of bread and giving these loaves of bread that they'd baked to the priest for the communion. And so in a way, you know, the whole community is bringing the bread of life. And these would be taken, little bits from it taken, and used also. But in the preparation for of the communion, there are portions taken out of the prosphora, out of the bread that's prepared for the communion, portions of it that are named. So each person that is on that list of the living is named for Niels, for Ted, for Derek, for Kahindi, for Jeremy, and it's put in the chalice. And then for all those that have gone before, it's put in the chalice. And sometimes, you know, it's so odd to me. Sometimes I know people have gotten exercised about this and they say, well, you can't use the name of somebody who's not Orthodox. But I mean, my sense, this is entirely, I mean, it's entirely not the point. And So all of those go into the chalice. And then they all are given in communion. And the prayer, of course, of the gathering up of the world, as I like to call it, when we pray for various aspects of life and bring it there. The fact that we're surrounded if you're in a Orthodox temple that's thoroughly painted, you're surrounded by all these men and women from all these different stations of life over the last 2,000 years, all of which the tradition sees of having been given God's grace, having received, having accepted, having been ushered into God's grace. But if you know much about them, some of it's a real rogues gallery. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Just like the scripture. Because who are all these people in the scripture? Well, they're us. They're us, and they're our neighbor. They're the people that we think are our enemies half the time. So it's an amazing way. I mean, it is why we call it the Eucharist. It's the great thanksgiving for what is, for what has been, is, and shall be, world without end. Amen. It's an amazing sort of way, in many, many different ways, of trying to help us understand and see that, so that we don't have to seek agreement. We don't have to seek comprehension. This is not, as you were tempted to speak about, Andrew, this is not about identity. It's about transfiguration of everything that is. So the world becomes new.
That's very beautiful.
There's one little element, if I can just add this, or just put it on the table, which is kind of existential, I suppose, that in thinking about this ahead of time, I was pondering it a little bit. And I don't want to make this overly, I'll just use a personal illustration. I have, when I've been invited to give a little talk somewhere, I have noticed in myself that my capacity, I don't even know if that's the right word, to talk well, and I'm not entirely sure what I mean by that, but my capacity to talk well depends almost so deeply on who it is in the room and on their, I suppose I could say, they're attending to it. But my sense is that there's something going on between us in that, even though I might be the one talking. Or I could think of situations where I'm with somebody else talking. The difference between the quality of, not even sure what I'm, communication as communion is so striking. And I think I'm, for a variety of reasons, maybe this isn't about preparation. I mean, you can prepare for something, you can give a kind of elegant speech or something like that. That's different. It's where your reflection and the listening and the responding actually really changes your reflection. It becomes so much more vivid. I think that's at least for me personally, that's one place where this issue of synergy is really vivid, where you realize how significant the other is in pulling forward what's on the table.
Well, that makes me think of like the difference between a good concert and how much the audience is into it, or
Yeah.
a sporting event where
Yeah.
the crowd gets the home team back in the game and then they can come back from certain defeat.
And another example I would use from when I played hockey. I mean, I was not nearly as excited about scoring the goal as I was about the dance down the ice with the opposition.
Mm.
They were partners. It was
Mhm.
that dynamic that occurs there. And people who are dancers and musicians must always experience this. I mean, in those ways, really vividly. And to my mind, that's part of what's, when we speak about to participate in the divine energy, in the energy of togetherness, in the energy of communion, in the energy of delight and joy, in the energy that makes us new beings with others. It's there all over our life.
Final thoughts?
For me, just the sense of the surprise. I keep coming back to the phrase, the surprise of grace. Something unexpected, I think, is for me that characterizes grace, whether it be the grace of, like you said, David. I really resonate with that thought of um, thinking well, speaking well, reflecting well. Very much depends on the other person, and there's incredible surprises of grace in that, and I guess I see the activity of grace is synergy. There's something happening beyond comprehension, understanding. I think we've said beyond agreement. We've said that, and that's really profound. And I think sometimes it may happen later on this evening as I go and talk to my wife about reflecting on some of the things that hit me. Something else may hit all of.
Something else has hit, Ted, I think. You've become frozen.
Yeah, it's been doing
Oh,
that
there
a
you
few
are.
times. Sorry
You're
about
back.
that. Yeah.
You're back now.
Yeah. Just the unexpected and
Yeah.
surprise of grace and synergy and communion, togetherness. It's beautiful. That's my final thought.
I find it interesting that life is in the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the becoming,
Yes.
in the drawing near. In the transformation.
Mhm.
Robert Frost, in his introduction to his collected poems, has the phrase, speaking about poetry, but I think it has to do with this, the surprise, delight in discovering what I didn't know I knew. Yeah.
I like that, what I didn't know I knew.
Yeah.
And just to gather things, let me think out loud for a minute. We can address it now or later as we please, or another. This idea of response, David, I really appreciate that personal example you gave, because I think that many of us can feel that, even at another degree or slightly removed from your own experience. That's how well we are working depends on partly the response. And it's curious that something like synergy can never be forecast. Always has to be a mode of response. Because we can't say, okay, I'll be in synergy with David tomorrow when I'll do this. No, because it's in the moment. Response, we've said more than once, that response provides the horizon of meaning for our action or an encounter. As Christians, we actually co-respond always, rather than just respond. Because if we're formed in the, well, as Christians, as human beings, but in a Christian way of phrasing it, if we're formed in the image and likeness of God, and if the love of Christ suffuses all of creation, then when we respond with love, we are responding to love with love. But since our being is a gift, it is a co-response. Our response is given to. For a long time, I've loved the writer, I guess, thinker, Mikhail Bakhtin. And he sees at the heart of all meaning, dialogue, two voices or more. Gadamer also sees conversation at the heart of all meaning. And I'm deeply formed by that, my own self. Those two thinkers especially. And I think that a kind of, a readiness for a good response, for responding well to another person, isn't a bad discipline. I think also that, well, so that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, how do we know, how do we kind of, to speak cheaply, evaluate the quality of our response? If we're looking for effects, or if we're looking for results, we might shape our response to another person or interaction with them in terms of that, seeking to have an effect. In other words, we speak or be or act falsely in order to bring about an end we think we see. The great filmmaker Robert Bresson, who to me is as clarifying of theology as anyone in the 20th century, love his work. He had his actors, his models, as I say them, not respond to the other person, not think of the other person's opinion or thoughts, but rather to say the lines, as it were, from the center, almost automatically, without art, without design, artifice, without design, not looking for an effect, just to say what is being said from the center. That's all. This to me is amazing, an amazing deepening of how we can understand monologue and dialogue. Our reverence for dialogue or conversation is thorough. I mean, we're all here. It's a beautiful truth and a beautiful part of life. But then we also must think, how often does our response seek to turn a living communion into an event or into a willed kind of results? Often for our own benefit, to look good, to be right, to win, to get some kind of gain. Bresson just shatters all those idols of looking good in someone else's gaze and says, here's how you can be truly your own. And, you know, Bresson is he's a Catholic too, so he's got a sense of Christ at the center. He's got a strong sense of Christ at the center of all being. That concentration we were speaking of earlier, as a form of prayer, as a movement within which we find Christ within. There's something there, I think, in that little complex of things. We can think about it or just ponder it. Our being is response, is responding. But to what and from where we're responding. As David said earlier, if we respond out of our own passion, then we have stepped away from that synergy, from that communion, that intimacy, that presence with another person. And often we do respond out of our own passion because we want to be right. We want to have the world reflect our will, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's stepping away from synergy. Final word, David? If you like one.
Nils, do you have a final word? Jeremy, do you have a final word?
Let me give the final word then.
Okay.
Next month, we'll be talking about grace. We'll be led in conversation by David Doran. So this will be, let's hold this conversation in mind and return to these matters. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for a good, productive discussion.
Good to see
Synergy is hard. It's hard. Ciao, everyone.